this weekend, we took my son, Hayden Rowland, to college. It was an emotional time. It's the second one of our kids to leave the nest and go to college. We still have one left at home. But it really got me thinking about Hayden growing up and Turner growing up and the boys leaving the house and Hannah still being there, and got a little emotional, a little sentimental. And I wanted to watch some of the shows that we had done and see how the kids had grown. So I pulled up Waypoint TV on the Apple TV, and I easily went back through all of our episodes and found the first ever episode that we filmed with the kids. And Hayden was just a little boy. Turner was a little boy. Austin, Rich's son, was literally a baby. Then I just progressed through the seasons and watched how the kids had grown. And it was just such an easy way to watch what I wanted to watch. I could watch it where I wanted to watch, when I wanted to watch it. I could skip through it, fast forward, move on to the next episode. It was so easy. And that's the way Waypoint TV is. Not just our shows are on there, but there's over 60, 70 different producers now, both in hunting and fishing. And if you have a favorite, you can scroll through there just as easily as I did to find the old childhood memories, or the memories of my son's childhood, rather, as I got emotional in his departure to college. Waypoint TV is available on every device, including smartphones, smart TVs, Apple TV, Roku, on and on and on. Just go to waypointtv.com. You can find out how you can watch Waypoint TV. And you know what? It's entirely for free to the consumer. Entirely for free. So check out Waypoint TV.
I spent a long time looking at it. I think for me, that was probably one of the biggest decisions I made of like, am I doing this for the right reasons or not? But I decided that I wanted to do it. And so we set up a big safety plan and made it happen. But essentially it was kind of probably like a 70 or 80 foot drop, but halfway, but it lands like right against a rock shelf at the bottom. So you have to get further out from that. So the goal is to like, you free fall for about 20 feet, and then there's a shelf that you try to hit, and then that kind of would like bounce you out, and then you gap the shelf at the bottom. So you have to like hit the first one to miss the second one, basically.
Wow.
And then right after that, there's like a 30-footer right below it that kind of, by itself, it's not too bad, but just because it's right below it, if anything went wrong on the big one, then it's right there. So it's kind of like a double sequence sort of thing. This is Hunt Jennings, and this is the Tom Rowland Podcast.
That was Hunt Jennings, and he was talking about running Wolf Creek, which is, in his opinion, the most difficult waterfall that he's run. Hunt Jennings is a professional kayaker. These days, he's also going to nursing school. Man, the guy, what would you think a guy that would run many 100-foot waterfalls would be like? Would you think that he would be cocky and brash and full of confidence? Well, I kind of thought that's what I might encounter, but was pleasantly surprised to see that Hunt was a far different man than that. He was contemplative and soft-spoken and intelligent, and he really thought more in a Zen-type way than in a kind of a conquering fashion of these waterfalls. Hunt started kayaking when he was in 6th grade, I think, and then he did something really cool, which is what intrigued me about getting him on the podcast. He left his conventional high school his junior year and went to a school where they camp out. They actually take their classes on the edge of the river. They move around like a vagabond school. And in the afternoons, they have dedicated kayak practice. Everybody that's there is there for one reason, basically, to go to high school and to become a much better kayaker. He did this. And not only did he become much better, he became one of the best in the world. Hunt has done many first descents on lots of waterfalls. And man, he's had some incredible adventures and experiences way off the beaten path. And he just has a very interesting point of view on life, mostly that, in my experience of just talking to him, that he learned from two things. One being wrestling, which is very close to my heart, and the other, kayaking. We had a lot of interesting conversations on the similarities and differences between wrestling and kayaking, and also the lessons that the river can teach you. And he was open to the idea that the river can teach you these lessons, whether you're kayaking or fishing or whatever. Being on the water, learning how to read the water, learning how to live in, on, and around the river can teach you a lot of life lessons that he has been able to translate into his academics and into his regular life. Hunt's a very interesting character. This will be one of the most interesting podcasts that we have done yet. It's with extreme kayaker Hunt Jennings coming up. All right, so Hunt Jennings.
Yeah.
Man, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. Well, I've heard a lot about you. We have a mutual friend in David Levitt.
Yeah.
He's one of your training partners and kayak buddies.
He is. Yes, sir. He was my teacher, my coach, and then eventually kind of like we became kind of training partners, like you said.
Yeah. And so you've been all over with him, right?
Yeah. He started when we were in middle school, and he was our teacher. He took us over the summer to out to Idaho for a kayaking trip, and then that kind of fired everything off. And since then, we've been traveling. And
so, how old were you when your first exposure to Idaho in the West?
Let's see. I was probably 14 or 15 when we first went out there. So had you been kayaking a good bit before then? I had. Yeah, I started in 6th grade, so I guess this was 8th grade that we went out there, and just learning the basics, learning to roll your kayak over and stuff like that. So, and you learned that mostly in the swimming pool or the lake or wherever you learned the basics. Yeah. You start out definitely in the pool and flat water, and kind of just learn those basics, and then start on the easiest river kind of you can find. So around here, that would be the Hiwassee River, and then progress your way up to the Ocoee and stuff like that. So would you call yourself at some point, I'm learning online, and I'm not really a kayaker, although I've spent a lot of time on rivers as a drift boat guide and stuff, different kind of rivers than you're on, but parts of those rivers we take out before you put in for the deep stuff. So I might ask you some questions that are pretty basic, but would you consider yourself at some point you were a professional kayaker? Is that a fair thing to say? That's a fair thing, I guess. Yeah. I mean, I had sponsorships, and they helped some for me to travel and do stuff like that. It's kind of a joke in kayaking in some ways, because there's a lot of opportunity for sponsorships once you get to a certain level, but there's kind of a narrow opportunity to have, I guess, to make like a sustained living off of it. So I wouldn't say that I was, like, right now I'm not completely supported by my sponsors and stuff, but I would say for sure that I was kind of in that world. Yeah. And so that sponsorship enabled you to travel all over the world. Is it all over the world or all over the country, or where all has it taken you so far? So yeah, I've done a good bit of traveling over the world, really. And my junior and senior year of high school, I did some study abroad stuff. Yeah, that's interesting. I was reading about that. So that was called Patagonia Study Abroad. Is that what it's called? There's that, which is kind of the gap year, kind of like more college credit type stuff, and then New River Academy was the actual high school. So it's an accredited high school, and so yeah, it was. I kind of did that. I went to Macaulay and did that kind of like in relationship with Macaulay. Right. So how did that happen? You were just super interested in kayaking? Were you always drawn to kayaking, or was it was there a moment that you just decided this is it? I love this. I'd always been really drawn to kayaking for sure. I was pretty into wrestling as well, and that's partially how I know David Levitt. He was my coach and everything, and I think there came a point where they were both taking so much time that I was kind of just had to decide. I really wanted to go kind of all out in one of those.
Okay.
And I chose kayaking, and there's this opportunity that I found out about through the New River Academy School to go there, and my parents were supportive. So
they were? How did you break that to them?
It took a lot of kind of like meeting people that had gone to the school and then getting them to talk to my parents to be like, oh, it's a real thing. Like you can, it's not like a fake school or something like that. You know? There's a student that went to Macaulay. He was probably like, when I was in 6th grade, he was probably like a sophomore or something, and he went there. So I think that helped.
So where was this school?
It's based out of West Virginia. And so, but then each quarter they would fly somewhere different and travel around. So we went to like Canada the first quarter I was there, and then Chile the second quarter. And
so what does a day at this school look like?
So a day would be, I mean, it's honestly, they set it up to where it's fairly similar to a normal high school. The difference is that you're staying either camping or staying really close to a river, so that instead of going to wrestling practice after school, you go to kayaking practice. And so from like 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. would be classes, and then evening would be kayaking, and then eat dinner, do homework, and do it again the next day.
And then you're camping right there? Like everybody's on site next to the river, and you're having classes right next to the river?
Yeah, a lot of times that would be how we did it. If it was remote and there's no hostels or anything to stay in, we would camp on the side of the river, and like ideally they'd try to find somewhere like that had like sort of like, I don't know, a pavilion or picnic tables or something to do class on. But yeah. And
so the class load, the workload that you're taking is similar to like what you would have in a regular high school year. You're having history and math and science and those type of courses.
Yeah, it was fairly similar. I tried to take everything that I was going to be taking at my high school in Macaulay, and just take those credits there. Yeah.
And then they were transferable once you decided that was, I mean, is that kind of school something that you would see people go in for a semester or two and then return to their high school after they'd gotten really good at kayaking, or are people like career students there?
Definitely. There's probably more students that do it for like a semester or a year, and that's originally my dad. My dad actually made me like sign a contract with him that's saying that I would only go for a semester, and I kind of like talked my way out of it. But yeah, but just partially because of the cost, it's expensive to travel and everything, and then also just I think parents like their kids to be in a like more stationary school and a home.
Well, why did you think this was a great opportunity for you? I mean, I'm sure, for the people that are listening, they may not be familiar with Macaulay. I also went to Macaulay. That's one of the reasons that I know about Hunt through my friend David Levitt, who's a wrestling coach there, has coached both my boys. And we talk about his kayaking a lot. And we also talk about, what he's doing. And he has told me some stories about Hunt, which made me want to have him on the podcast. Macaulay is an excellent school in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I mean, when I say an excellent school, it is one of the top schools in the country. So it's interesting for me to ask the questions of why did you think that this kayaking school or this New River Academy was going to be what you wanted to do? Because a lot of people are super happy at Macaulay, right? And being challenged greatly, either academically or there's tons of athletic opportunities, some being a small kayaking program, certainly nothing like what you're going to. But why did you think that this might be something that you wanted to do?
For me, it was just kind of like I was just very passionate about it from the beginning. Starting in 6th grade, the only opportunities for me to go kayaking were kind of through the school's trips on weekends or whatever, and that kind of. But I was always so excited about it, and I think my passion just kind of grew. And then getting the opportunity to go out west a couple times kind of just kindled that more and more. And I was just very passionate about it, and I think when I found out about the opportunity to go to a school that would like foster just kayaking, that idea just like stuck in my head until I kind of tried to make it happen. So
yeah. And what were the teachers like at this school?
So I'm just thinking from a standpoint of trying to run a school like that. It's hard to find teachers that are qualified to teach subjects and that are competent kayakers as well. So they were all kind of like qualified in what they would teach, just like at Macaulay or whatever, have degrees in what they're teaching. And they were all kayakers as well. So they weren't necessarily, I don't think it's a requirement for them to be like expert kayakers to be teachers. There's different levels that they were on. And then they would have a kayaking coach to kind of be like the one that was like the expert and there to guide all of us kind of. So kayaking wise, the teachers were kind of like more or less on the same level as the students. And then, and they were more there to teach their subject, and then the coach was there to teach kayaking.
And then those teachers, are they managing some of the safety on the river, like making sure nobody's getting swept downstream? Or I don't know how they would do that. How many students would be out in a standard kayak practice?
Yeah, so depending on the difficulty of the river, we'd either all be out there together, or sometimes they would separate us into like a more experienced group goes to the harder river and less experienced group goes to the easier river. And then the teachers kind of corresponding to their skill level would go with that group. So a lot of times the teachers were involved in kind of the leadership and the logistics of everything. But also, a huge part of the school to me and what I got out of it was like kind of the life lessons, I guess, that it taught us, like aside from academics, is like we were also involved in the kind of logistics and the coordination of safety and everything. So I think that kind of like subconsciously gives you kind of like a sense of responsibility and whatever to your group of people that you're with, and kind of teaches you lessons like that. So for me, that's kind of like, I feel like I got some good.
That's what you took away from the school. Obviously you probably became a much better kayaker when you went there and you're kayaking every single day with a coach and learning specific skills. And there's probably a template of how he plans to teach this. There's like a stair step to getting to the more difficult things that you're going to do. But it's interesting to hear you say that you came away with a sense of responsibility more, before you say, well, I became a much better kayaker, which I'm sure you did, but the responsibility is something that stuck with you.
To me, the kayaking is amazing and definitely much better at that than I think I would have through the opportunities that I got. But lessons like that, I think, were the most valuable to me. Like, just like, the responsibility, the ability to think on your feet and for yourself, think about more than yourself, like the group that's involved, because you can't be successful really unless your whole group is successful. Kind of that mentality. And then also just like, the places that we went to get to the rivers were remote. And so you kind of, I guess, get exposed to other things that I probably wouldn't have seen growing up here in Chattanooga, going to Macaulay, we were around a lot of poverty, a lot of people that were way less fortunate, I guess, than we were. And so that was kind of like, I think in my life, that was a big point where I was kind of like exposed to a lot more than I had ever been before. Yeah. So it was a lot of stuff all in one kind of learn there.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I think that it's so important for young people to travel, whether it's within the United States or abroad, to see that and get a bigger worldview than just your hometown. Because, like you say, there's poverty, there's people that are super disadvantaged. There's people that are super disadvantaged that you're around and you're like, wow, these people are super happy. Like, you would think from the outside that they have nothing, but these are the happiest people that I've ever been around. And I've seen that in Christmas Island and in places, extremely remote places like Australia, where I've been there, and some of the people that are there literally don't have anything, but they are the happiest people that I've ever seen. Yeah. Right? They just have, they're not being held down with any possessions. They're not being held down with responsibility. It's just them and their family, and they spend all their time with their family, and they're super happy about it. And You'll see even some documentaries on Netflix. I think there's one called Happy there, and it goes into trying to find the happiest people on the planet, and a lot of them don't have much.
Yeah.
It's very interesting kind of deal. So then when you're at this school, how would you say you were as a skill level when you went into this school?
I'd say I was competent. I'm not an expert by any means.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say, whitewater is ranked in difficulty of class 1 to class 5 rapids, and as you get better and better, you can, I guess, say you're comfortable with running class 3 and comfortable with running class 4 and so on. So I'd say when I went there, I was comfortable running class 3, I would say. And I could handle class 4, but maybe needed a little more support with me to make it down that. That's kind of where I was, I think.
And then when you go there and you're getting this coaching and they're pointing out, they've seen people transition through this process that you're doing, and they're able to, just like wrestling, they're able to say, okay, well, you're a pretty decent wrestler. Let me show you a few things here, and these are the things that you need to work on. And I'm assuming that's what they do with the kayaking too. So did you experience a few things at that school that put you on a different level? And was that pretty early in the school?
I think so. Yeah, it was, a lot of it was, it's interesting because you're there every day with the same people. Right. And so the change for me, I felt like was a little, I didn't notice it as much until, maybe I came back to home and was kayaking with people that I had been before I left. And then I was like, whoa, or on the same rivers that I had paddled before I left. And I was like, I'm so much more comfortable on this river now or whatever. And so for me, it was a gradual change, and I didn't see that at first. But then I remember I had an epiphany one day, and I was just like, wow, like the time you spend doing something really matters to how much you improve. And even if, obviously trying to get better every day, that's what we're working on. But it just wasn't as apparent to me while I was in that setting until I had something to contrast it to. And so when I came home and saw kind of the skills I had when I left versus the skills I had now, it was like a kind of a whoa moment. It really matters, the time you get to spend doing something.
And also who you're around, who you surround yourself with matters greatly.
For sure.
So with this moment of, wow, I'm pretty good now. I feel like I can do about anything. Is that when you might have looked at something that you previously thought was impossible and you think I could do that?
I think so, yeah. There was definitely a time when I came home from the school, and there's Chattanooga, we're blessed to have a lot of rivers and creeks for kayaking and fishing, whatever, around here. But there's a handful of creeks that are harder around here because they run off of the mountains, Lookout Mountain, Signal Mountain, and they have class 5 whitewater, and those had been kind of I knew of them before going to the school, but they'd kind of been up off of my radar. I didn't think I had the skills, and I remember coming back and watching videos of those and being I think I could do that, and then starting to branch out and do some of that stuff. So it was definitely, it changed kind of towards the end of going to that school. I began to be able to see things as I could probably do that now.
Yeah. So when you think I can probably do that now, a lot of the buddies that you had and you were kayaking with before, you've surpassed their ability. So who do you go do this new thing with? These creeks that are coming off Lookout Mountain that are class 5 and you've never done them before. Do you find a whole new group of paddlers to go with?
Chattanooga has a good community of people that go run these creeks, and some of the people that I went to school with at the kayaking school were from this area, so I was kind of lucky in terms of being able to go out with them. And then also I had 2 really good friends and teammates from the wrestling team I was on that were kayakers too, and they kind of really put in work to make kayaking a priority for them, and so they kind of progressed along as well. And to this day we still go kayaking together and stuff. So that was, I think it was a unique, it's not easy to do that at Macaulay. You have, or any high school, you have a lot of responsibilities studying. And if it's not made a priority, kind of at the kayaking school, it's hard to do that. But in this situation, I think we all kind of made it a priority to do it together because we love doing it. We love doing it together. And so that's kind of cool. We still do it today. So
yeah. And then, so as you're kind of stair-stepping towards these more and more challenging things, really, when I do my homework and a lot of the stories that David has told me, one of the things that you're known for outside of being a very good technical kayaker at a very young age, it seems, is doing some waterfall drops that, I mean, they seem impossible. And so David told me that you had done 100-footer.
Yeah, I've done a couple around that height. That's kind of like the peak of the height that I've gone to.
Are there people that go higher?
There are. I mean, like, there's not a ton. Once you start getting, like I'm not a physics major, but if you like calculate acceleration and free fall, like once you start getting above 100 feet, you start landing a lot faster and with more impact. So despite however easy the waterfall is, the rapid coming into it, just the sheer height makes it kind of a numbers game, I guess. Yeah. And I mean, like, it's very calculated, but like everyone makes mistakes, and a mistake from 100 feet is not usually good. I
mean, that's really, really bad. That could easily be death, right? And that's something that you're trying to factor in. Is this a possibility? Can I do this safely? Right? Yeah. You don't want to just do it once. You want to do that again. Yeah. So I'm very interested in how, in this decision-making process. Well, first of all, let's talk about what you've done so far. You've done a couple of 100-footers?
Around 92 100-footers. Yeah, there's one in Oregon, and then one here, close to here in Alabama, that I've done. So.
And then what would be the next step down, easier, from the 90 to 100-footers? Like 60?
Yeah, there's a couple 60, 70-footers near here and in South America where we were that I've gotten to do that have been good practice.
Okay. And good practice, huh? Okay. And then the next step down, I mean, obviously we're stepping down in height, but I'm sure that there are some things that are like 50 feet that are more difficult than a 70-footer. I mean, just because of the volume of water or whatever. But so at this point, you've done some 90 to 100-footers, and you've stepped down and basically done, I'm assuming, a lot of things between just a standard Class 5 rapid, and then you're starting to get to the drops, and you're going higher and higher and higher and higher and higher. So how many people in the world are doing these kind of things? Because when I think of a 100-foot waterfall, I don't really think of a lot of people that want to go off of that in a kayak.
Yeah.
But maybe I'm missing a whole subculture that I don't know about.
There's definitely, it's grown for sure. Since I think when I started doing it, there was a lot less people doing it. And in terms of the whole world, there's very few people that desire to do that, I think. But in terms of kayaking, I think the number of people that do waterfalls has grown. I think part of that is because of video. I think the GoPros and stuff like that allow you to see firsthand what you need to do it. Waterfalls is kind of a weird thing too, because anyone can sack up and go run a big waterfall. You have to just be willing to fall, I guess. And there's a lot of calculation that goes into it. There's also a lot of people that are just emotionally fired up and maybe don't think through everything like they should. But it's kind of like it's interesting, like the height of a waterfall and the rapid coming into it, what the landing is like. Everything comes together to make each one very different. And so I think a lot of people are drawn towards waterfalls that we call them clean waterfalls. So it's kind of just easy at the top, fall, big pool at the bottom, and you're at risk of landing flat, hurting your back, getting injured. But in the grand scheme of things, it's safe in terms of you're going to be in a big pool at the bottom.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. You're going to some of these falls, and it's one thing to be growing up around one of the falls in Alabama. Is that DeSoto Falls or something like that you ran?
DeSoto Falls.
Okay,
there's
so
another one.
So that one, let's just say that one. You're around that. It's not that far away. You can go there in the winter. You can go there in the summer. You can go there in the spring. You can see what's there. Sometimes there's not a lot of water coming out. You could put a snorkel and a mask on and go down there and see, have a good idea. Are there giant boulders down below this? Or what's the process in scoping out a fall and think, okay, that one's clean. I can easily do this, but I need to wait for these certain water conditions to be able to do it, or there's too much water going over. I could do it when there's less. I mean, are those the kind of things that you're thinking about?
For sure, yeah. And some of them, have been done by a lot of people. And so just judging off of that, you kind of don't need to do, I mean, if 20 people go over it and don't hit the bottom, then it's probably deep enough, But others that have been done less are the ones that you really have to put your work into. And that kind of became my passion, I guess, around here. It's like I started noticing all these waterfalls and I was like, why have people not done them? And I'm like, because one, they don't run very, like you said, the water level has to be perfect. You have to wait for the right amount of rainfall. And two, it's unknown. No one's done it before. So no one really knows what's going to happen, if it's possible. And so to do that, I think I've gone swimming in a ton of waterfalls, especially around here in the summer. I go swimming and see where the water's landing when it's low, come back when it's higher, see where it's landing, swim to the bottom, see how deep it is, and mark the pool around the edge. A lot of times when it rains, the pool level will actually rise 5 or 10 feet, which makes the depth better. So all those things go into play. And then also just trying to understand how the water works and how your kayak works in the water. So we've even gotten fish tanks before and made a waterfall going into the fish tank so we could see from the side and make little wooden kayaks or something and see how they land and how much, I guess, depth you really need. It's surprising how little depth you really need to land a kayak.
So are there special kayaks that you're using? I mean, when I go and drive by the Ocoee or something, I see every manner of kayaks, the long skinny ones, the little short ones where your feet are right at the end, all of these different kind of kayaks, and obviously they have different buoyancy and different surface area, which would have a big impact on both how you landed and what impact you made, or how buoyant they were if you just shot back up to the surface or if you went under. What are you looking for in a giant waterfall kind of kayak?
And now more than ever, kayaking's grown. The amount of designs of kayaks have increased, so there's a lot to choose from. But ideally, we call them creek boats. So they're kind of not the short kayaks used for tricks, and they're not the long racing ones. It's like a happy medium, and they're easy enough to control and move around that you can make adjustments and stuff, but they're not so short that you don't have any speed or you don't have any protection or anything. So they're usually about 8 to 9 feet long, and that's kind of what you want to go over a waterfall. And then if you get really picky, there's the bottom of them. Some are flat, which is if you land on a flat hold kayak, it's a lot harder of an impact than one that's displaced or rounded. And then the shape of the rocker, some of the bows scoop up, and that can, when you land, that can cause it to kind of G out really hard and stop abruptly, which is
not exactly what you're looking for.
Yeah, and then some of them have less of that, and it allows them to kind of pencil. And essentially what you want off of a tall waterfall is you want to land straight in and go down, and the longer
with the nose of the kayak going in first.
Yeah, it's basically like cliff diving. Like if you belly flop off of a tall cliff, it's the same thing. You're sitting, so if you land flat, that kind of compresses your spine. There's a lot of back injuries in kayaking, and there's you can also, that's basically the main danger, I guess. Is you want to land straight in, and
there's also drowning, hitting the bottom.
Yeah,
there's a number of there's a number of things that could go wrong. But that's interesting how you want to do that, because when I see the pictures of you going off of these giant waterfalls, some of them it looks like you're almost leaning back and you're trying to keep the boat like this, but you really want it to nose in, right?
Depending on the height, yeah. So the tall ones, you want to go straight in. If there's a margin, kind of like 20 feet, you can land flat and be fine. Some 30-footers, depending on the water at the bottom, you can be fine. I've seen people boof. Sorry, I'm using kayaking lingo, but boof is where you land flat. I've seen people land flat off of 40 and 50, 60-foot waterfalls and be fine.
Really? So, seems like that would hurt. I mean, it seems like it'd knock the teeth out and do all kinds of damage to your back.
Yeah, I think it definitely has potential to, but people get away with stuff. So it's, but then also people, I mean, I have a couple of friends. One friend broke his back on a 20-footer and another broke his back on a 30-footer. So it's like,
were you with them?
I was with both of them.
So on situations like that, did this school or other opportunities train you in wilderness EMT or other situations? How are, I mean, obviously you're going into these situations with a group of people. You, or probably every one of you, needs to have some sort of medical training in case something goes bad and it's going to be in a remote area. What's your protocol there? How do you prepare yourself for that?
I think so. I mean, we were all certified in CPR and stuff like that. And then, they have programs like wilderness first aid programs, and I think that stuff is good. But honestly, like, I've taken those and you learn it, remember it for a week or something, and if you don't use it, you forget it. So to me, like, the best way to learn stuff like that is to do it. The more you go kayaking, the more you're going to be exposed to situations where people need help and stuff like that, and you learn fairly quickly the most efficient way to get stuff done. And then just like, I think after one thing like that happens to you, you kind of ideally start thinking like, what am I going to, when you're putting on a river, what am I going to do if something goes wrong? Like, can we hike out, or are there walls on both sides? Where's the closest hospital? Where's the takeout? You kind of go through like, what would I do if this happened? And then ideally you communicate that with other. If you have a good crew, like we do things down to like we tell each other where we leave our key, we hide our keys on our car, because if something happens and you don't, and that's something you might not think about to do, like especially if it's your car, you don't need to tell anyone where the keys are. But if you don't tell anyone and then something happens to you, then, and you have the only car, like how are they gonna help you? So stuff like that, I think, just like over time, like learning from people that are better than you, seeing stuff happen and making mistakes, I think is kind of the best way to do that. Surrounding yourself with people that are more experienced than you.
Yeah, obviously we do some similar things in the fishing, mostly because we were afraid we might drop their keys in the river, much more so than dumping the whole boat. But it happens. I mean, you're in a drift boat and you're going down, and you're in class 1 whitewater, but you have two guests with you, and you don't have a lot of freeboard in these boats to begin with, and you get a little bit sideways, and the oar gets stuck in a rock, and next thing you know, you're taking half the river inside the boat. And it can happen, and it does happen, and even can happen in knee deep water, you know, when something unexpected can happen. But you have to be prepared for all of those things. But kayaking is just such an extreme sport. I think of all of the sports out there in the extreme sports, and I think of kayaking as being definitely one of the ones that is the most extreme, because you're getting pushed underwater. You're rolling your kayak. There are giant rocks under there. The river is taking you and in control, really. So you have to kind of learn to. It's kind of like in wrestling a lot of times, where, and I'd be interested to know what you think the similarities between wrestling and kayaking are, because I'm sure that you can find some. And if it draws someone like you to it and someone like David Levitt to it, there's obviously some sort of connection between the two. But I would think that, you know, like if you're wrestling someone that is super strong, you're not going to outpower them. Yeah. So you have to work with them and use their strength against them. So if they don't know much about wrestling and they come barreling across the mat at you, well, good. You just snap them down and move out of the way, and now you got the takedown, and it was very easy, right? Yeah. Because that guy came so hard at you that now it's a very easy thing to get out of the way and get around him. A river there is no overpowering the river. You have to go with the river. So what do you think? Have you ever thought about that? Like you said you really liked wrestling and you really liked kayaking. What do you think are the similarities and differences that you found?
You kind of nailed it. I think the main thing is just on a surface level, you have to be tough for both of them.
Yeah.
I think wrestling made me like a lot tougher, that just mentally and physically, like, and kind of knowing your limits and like what you can go through, and then mentally preparing for something. There's a lot of people that are good enough to do a lot of whitewater that choose not to, just because the stress and anxiety that comes from the risk is too much, and that's fine. But I think wrestling helped me be able to like just be mentally tougher. In wrestling, you don't really get much. It's like, this is your guy, you're wrestling him, and so I think that aspect kind of helped me. But then also, like you said, like the learning to work with something in terms of like, or instead of opposing it. Like wrestling is a lot about momentum and like angles and stuff like that. Not just, I mean, sometimes you can just completely overpower someone, but if there's two really good guys, they're equally as strong and stuff like that. And in kayaking, the river is way stronger than you. You have no chance. So it is a balancing game of trying to like kind of like harness the energy of moving water and use that to your advantage. And so, yeah, a lot of times, it's funny, a lot of times, like, because I've taught kayaking a good bit too, teach lessons and stuff. A lot of times the guys that are like football players come in, they want to learn how to roll, and they're super athletic, and they've never really had any problems with learning how to do something athletic. And then they get really frustrated because they're trying to like use their power to like roll up. Like even rolling up, it's not about like how strong you are or anything. It's about technique and stuff. And so a lot of times people that are used to like doing something like that have trouble with kayaking because it's more about like letting go and learning when to let go and when to use kind of strength and when to like back off and let the river do the work for you. So.
Yeah, there's a lot of similarities to wrestling like that. You know, I mean, you can think about 100 different moves, just even a half Nelson. It's like sometimes, you know, or you want to put somebody in a cradle, and one of the tricks that I remember Gordon Connell showed me was like, the guy won't give you your leg, will push it down. You know, you're trying to lift it up, and if you push it down, then the guy wants to lift it up, so he puts it exactly where you wanted it to. So you actually are using the opposing force to really fool somebody. And I would imagine that you could do the same thing with the river. One of my favorite things we would do in the rivers that we would fish out west, I would love to fish the eddies. And I was always fascinated by the eddies. And even in a river that doesn't have a lot of white water, it's the South Fork of the Snake River, and it had a lot of volume. And the volume is I mean, it's moving fast. And you would go down, and I would hit this eddy, and I could go back up in here, and I could just be just inches away from the main river, just cruising past. But I could just sit there. And I was always thinking that was so cool, because if I put this oar down, I was going to be taken. But if I could just somehow just stay, and keep the boat just like that. And I love how you do that in your videos. Like you'll go through something and you'll turn and you're just in this eddy and the river is cruising by and you're just able to just sit there. And I think that has to be one of the coolest things when you're learning how to kayak, is all of a sudden you're not overpowering the river. You're not letting the river just take you. You're using your brain. You've learned how to read this water, and you're just putting it in a place that's just big enough for the boat, and the river will hold you there. And so I'm sure that as you're learning how to do these waterfalls, and as you're learning how to run these Class 5 rapids, that has to be a major part of it, about learning to read. And that's what being a kayaker is all about, I'm sure. Is you can look at a river and go, oh, it's easy. You just go right through there like that, and you can see a line, right?
For sure, yeah. That is one of the coolest parts. It's kind of like learning a new language almost. Like I've read some books about kind of, I mean, I've always been interested in how our brains work and stuff.
Yeah.
So. But, you know, like when you're learning to read, you learn how to sound out the letters, and you learn how to piece them together and then sound out the words, and then gradually you read sentences. But now, like, once you know how to read, you don't really do that anymore. You just see the word and you recognize the word. So I think our brains are kind of programmed to pattern recognition and learning how to pick stuff out like that we do repetitively. And so, yeah, in whitewater, it's kind of like that. You know, when you start out, it's just kind of like intimidating. And you know that there is some rhyme or reason to it because you see other people doing it, but you can't do it yet. And so that, I think for me, that's kind of like one of the things that I was like, I just like really want to know how to like navigate this and read it for myself. And so just over time, you learn how to do that and how to pick those things out and how to, read the water. And
don't you think that it's important that and this is one of the things I think that is awesome about kayaking and so many other things as well, but there's a stair-step process to that. Like you can go to the Hiawassee River and then you can go to, I don't know, the next one up and the next one up, but you could, at any point in that process, you could go to the Ocoee and be like, whoa, that's way too much. I don't want anything to do with that, and that's impossible. And then if you just keep stair-stepping up and learning little skills here and there, learning there, and becoming more comfortable with more volume or a more powerful river or deeper, steeper river, then all of a sudden, and that's what I'm assuming your experience when you went to the school, and you come back and you're like, oh, all of a sudden these creeks that seem so intimidating, they don't. And you didn't even realize it was happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. And that's a great thing about the different rivers and being in an area where there are a lot of different rivers and a lot of different water levels, because I'm sure at different times of the year you can go and just get this stair-stepping experience that allows you to go to actually feel like at some point there's 100-footer and I can do that.
Yeah, for sure. That is how, I mean, and that's why, to me, that's why it's been, I think that's where my passion for it came from. And I mean, it's an adrenaline rush, but I think people in sports like this, like, kind of people view them as being like adrenaline junkies and stuff. But for me, I think my passion kind of came from that progression that you're talking about, and like just constant puzzle that it is to figuring stuff out and like learning how to gradually understand more and more complicated things. And so, do you think
that process of understanding more and more complicated things has helped you to outside of the river, off the river, and in your academics?
I think so. I took probably, 3.5 years off after high school to focus just on kayaking. And then I started taking some college classes, and now I'm about to graduate from nursing school. And so I think like just the mindset that it gave me to be like this is a very abstract thing. Like most people don't know how to like understand water and stuff, and like kind of if you can understand this, then I think myself and like everyone else included like can understand anything. So to me, it's like I see a lot of people that limit themselves because of their own mindsets and stuff. And so with school was intimidating to me because I hadn't been in school for almost 4 years, and like everyone talks about how hard like nursing school is or whatever. And to me, I kind of like relate back to the just like underlying lessons that I learned, I think, in kayaking, and draw confidence from that, and just know that if I put the time in, the work in, and try to understand it, like over time, I'll be able to. And I think that's really helped me in my academics, and then really to like all areas of life. I think there's doing anything like that, kayaking. It's cool. I'm reading like the book A River Runs Through It right now for the first time, and it's cool like seeing how they grew up, like learning the river and stuff. And it's like really similar, although they're fishing and they're reading the water in a different way. They're learning the same lessons in a way from the river and the things that they're doing to and those lessons kind of become more evident in their life and how they view life and things. So I think that's one of the coolest things about kayaking and really any sport like that teaches you kind of those lessons. And yeah, it's fun, and you can get really good at it, and you get competitive at it, but you also are taking away a lot of like lessons that can carry over to other parts of your life.
Do you think that those lessons, like you started kayaking at a very young age, do you look back on it now and go, oh, I kind of learned these things from kayaking. I realize now that I was learning a lot more when I was out there kayaking than just how to paddle a boat and how to get down a river safely? Or do you think that you were taking these kind of lessons in all along the way, even as a young person?
A little bit of both. I've always tried to take out, like, I guess consciously what I'm learning about it. But, like a lot of the time my focus has been just kayaking, especially when I'm when I was younger and in high school and just graduating high school, I was all fired up about kayaking. And I think a lot of those lessons I think I learned and didn't maybe become aware of until later. And I look back and I'm like, the way that I'm viewing this now is like coming from, or I learned how to look at this new situation from what I've done in the past, but I didn't really know that then. But I can tell now that it's helping me.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
I find it hilarious. Well, maybe hilarious isn't the right word, but it's kind of hilarious that somebody that will run a 100-foot waterfall is terrified of nursing school. But it's just perspective, you know. It's like, it's all about perspective. That's where you're super comfortable. You've been out of school for 3.5 years, and now you're going back to school, and that's a very intimidating situation. I always like it when you can take life lessons from something else and apply them over there and be like, well, I was afraid of that 100-foot waterfall at one point, but I went in there, I learned what I needed to learn, then sooner or later, I don't know if a 100-foot waterfall can ever be comfortable, but you did it.
Yeah,
right?
For sure.
And that's super cool. I really like that. So what do you think drew you to nursing school?
I think there's several reasons. I don't think I ever had quite the passion for school that I did for kayaking, but I started dating the girl that's now my wife.
I saw that. Congratulations.
So,
that's just recent, right?
Thanks. Yeah, it's a little less than a year now.
Okay,
so.
Great.
But I think that kind of just like in itself, when we started getting more serious, I was kind of like, I probably need to like do something besides like, I mean, I could like make enough money teaching kayaking or something for myself, but maybe not for both of us. So it was kind of like in a way, a long-term decision, but then also I had several friends that were nurses, and there's just like a lot of different ways you can go with it. So it's not really limiting in itself. And then I think it's the closest thing that I could think of to like what I was good at in the way of thinking that I was used to, in terms of like thinking critically and not having a right or wrong answer necessarily, and being able to like piece puzzles together, recognize things that are going wrong and stuff like that. And it's hands-on, so you're not just sitting at a desk all day long. So I was like, well, if I'm going to do anything, this sounds pretty good. And it's a 2-year, after your prereqs or whatever, it's a 2-year program. And so I was like, decided to go with it. So
and you're almost finished. One more semester? Or?
Yes, I'm going to be done in December.
Okay. Cool.
Everything goes all right.
Yeah. And so how are you balancing your kayaking? Do you have to put it aside a little bit or?
It's definitely not going every day like I would like to, but I've tried to manage that by like being more focused, I guess, when I do go kayaking. It's kind of like, I know like maybe I won't have tomorrow and the next day to go kayaking as well. So I'm going to put like all my focus and energy into this right now and focus on that. And then also like other ways to get better at kayaking, like watching video or thinking about new things to do. I think like it complements each other. They complement each other. And so I think I've been able to kind of maintain sort of a skill level. Although I get scared sometimes. I'm like, dang, like I'm not kayaking like every day like I used to. But then like once you go out and like paddle, it feels like normal. So it's definitely, I think there's like, as far as the big waterfalls go, I've kind of backed off of that a little bit while I'm in school, because to me that just takes so much, like it takes like all of my mental energy and focus to be able to like scout out what I want to do and like be in the right mindset to do it, I guess. So,
what is the mindset of taking on a 100-footer or a first descent or something super challenging? It doesn't have to. We don't have to put a label on how high, but I find it very interesting. Mindset to me is something that I talk about a lot on the podcast, and it's something that has been incredibly. It's a big part of my life. I believe that when you can control your mind, you can control your body. And your attitude going into something is it's everything. I mean, it's everything, whether it's a negotiation or a party or a wrestling match or kayaking or a fishing tournament or showing up as a fishing guide, that, you show up with a mindset like, this is going to be a great day. It doesn't matter what your customers are going to be like. You just have that mindset that I'm going to be the best fishing guide possible today. And there's nothing that these people can do that is going to deter from that. And if you go in anchored in that way, the outcome is almost always positive, right?
Yeah.
So when you're going to do a first descent, or you're going to challenge something, do something challenging, that process probably starts, weeks, months ahead of time?
I mean, to me, it's rare that I show up to like a waterfall, like a tall waterfall, just happen to show up and be like, impulsively run it. So to me, it's usually either something that I've really been wanting to do and watched a lot of video of or read about, or been there myself and scouted it a lot. And so planning it. And so part of that, like, I think the preparation, you feel like you put the work in for it. And the other, going back to the similarities between wrestling and kayaking, I think that's kind of like where I think I started learning how important your mindset is from wrestling. Because, you can go into a match and so much of it is dependent on your mindset. You may not feel good. You may have been cutting weight. You may have been like whatever, but like your mindset in that match, like it's the only thing that matters to go in, And and I think despite win or lose the wrestling match, like if you go in knowing that you're not gonna quit until the end, like, and you're gonna do your best and everything, you can't always control if you win or lose, but you can control like your effort that you're putting in until the end. And that's kind of like taking that and then going to kayaking. I think there's a lot of, it's complicated because like you want to make good decisions, and there's sometimes when you need to call it off and be like, this is too much is going in a negative direction. We need to like not do this today. And that's hard. That's sometimes harder to do than run it, because you want to run it so bad, but you need, so I think the ability to make I kind of had a rule for myself, like I would never go to a waterfall and say for sure that I'm going to run it until I'm like getting in my boat.
So like when you're planning on doing one of these, it's not just like you just happen down to the river and decide to run a 60-footer. You need some support there, right? Like, I mean, if you're doing it intelligently, you need a few buddies. And so now, instead of just going over and having fun on this river, you've all decided that this is what you're going to go do, and then you bail out. And I mean, how does that, like, I know that you're confident enough in your decision-making process that you're like, no, there's too many negative things going on, and your crew has to feel the same way, like, cool, man, let's go. We'll do it again another day, or maybe we won't ever do it, or whatever. But there had to be a situation or some times in your life where you're like, man, am I just chickening out? Am I just bailing on this? Or am I really making a good decision? Like, how do you tell the difference between looking at something and going, wow, I don't know, and just, I'm not going to do that one. And basically quitting on the idea versus making a good decision and saying, it's not today. I'll do it, but it's not going to be today. How does that work?
I think it's really, I mean, that's one of the trickiest parts, at least for me. And I think for a lot of people, that decision making and being able to analyze yourself and being like, where are these? I mean, there's so many feelings. Like when you get there, obviously, you're like humans aren't really meant to fall that far, go over a waterfall. So you're anxious and nervous. And then, but also there's other people involved. I mean, like a lot of times the crew momentum is like, it's weird. Like even if things are going negative, we talk a lot about like, I don't know if there's a name for it, but the concept of like, there will be multiplying negative factors and no one wants to be the one to call it off, you know? Like, it's raining, the water's coming up, it's late in the day, someone's not feeling good, like, we forgot our safety equipment, there's just like things like that, you know, that multiply really quickly, and that maybe one of those things isn't a reason to not do it, but
all of them are.
And just to have the judgment and then the courage to be the one to say, I think we should call it. And a lot of times it's amazing, like you just saying that and everyone else is like, yeah, we're good too. It's like, But then sometimes there's times where that's not the case, and people are bummed that you didn't do it. So I think being able to analyze where it's coming from, where the different feelings are coming from, it takes a lot of discipline and mental toughness. And I think one of my kind of like kayaking mentors told me one time, he told me to like think about it in terms, he's like, are you trying to talk yourself into it? He's like, if you're trying to talk yourself into doing something that may not be for the right reasons, but if you feel like truly that it's something you want to do and it's for a good reason, like you want to test yourself. I mean, basically running a waterfall is a test of how have all my other practice waterfalls and everything that I've worked for, like, can I put it together under pressure and make it work like here and test my skills and stuff like that, just like a test in school or any other sort of thing. It's like kind of a pinnacle sort of analyzation of your abilities. And do you want to do it for that reason and to push yourself and stuff? And you're just like scared because like you can want to do it and still be terrified at the same time. So,
right.
Or are you trying to talk yourself into it for some other reason? Like, what am I gonna like? It'd be cool on Facebook, or like, or like I'll be the first one to do it, or like no one's done it before, like stuff like that. And you're trying to talk yourself into it for other reasons. So I would always really try to, and that's something that you can carry over to life in general too. Like, why do I want to do this, and is it a reason that I should do it? And so I would kind of just keep that, and then if I determined that it's something that I wanted to do, then and everything logistically was working out, then it was usually the outcome was usually good. If it was something else impulsive or like other motives for doing it, talking myself into it, then I would try to like call it off. Or if someone else wanted to do it, I'd just set safety and help out or whatever. But
yeah, I think those decisions have served you well, right? Have you had any accidents?
I've been pretty lucky. You know, I had one concussion, and that was probably my worst injury in kayaking. But I guess relatively speaking, that's like I'm thankful for that, because it could be a lot worse. But generally, yeah, like I try to surround myself with good people that are respectful of those decisions. It's kind of weird, like people just get so fired up and they want to go, and they don't realize like we're all doing things that are like inherently endangering ourselves. So like people should be entitled to their own sort of like opinions or like decisions, at least, like if they want to go or not, and not be pressured into doing something. But it happens. It's like peer pressure. You get pressured into doing stuff. And I think just the key to longevity in the sport of kayaking, or any like extreme dangerous sport, is being able to make those decisions and to see the big picture, and instead of the.
Do you ever get in a situation, or are there ever any waterfalls that are like this, where when you put in, basically you're making the decision that all of you are going to run it today because the cliff walls are so steep, or there's no way to really hike around this. Once you get there, you're running it. Mm-hmm. That seems like that would be a very, very difficult time, because you put in a half mile above it, and then now you're noticing kind of the water's a little higher than it was last time, or maybe it's a little lower than it was last time, and you didn't necessarily notice that right away, but then you get down to where, I mean, basically by putting into the river, you've made the decision that you're running this thing. Are there waterfalls like that?
There definitely are, and those are things that you want to be well aware of ahead of time, and kind of the decision has to be made beforehand, and then after that, that's kind of a cool experience though too, because after that everything goes away, and once you're in there, it doesn't really matter. Like your only option is to go downstream or to figure it out like once it happens, you know. But at least going in, you need to assess kind of how everyone's feeling and kind of our mindset, and then make the decision as a group going in. And there's a lot of times like where things will change, and like, or say you do like part of it, there's a lot of times like that will happen, and there'll be like you might be with a group, and then you come to another section of river that's the harder section, or the more committing section, and some people want to like not go, and so you have to reorganize the group. You know, you might have 5 people and only 3 want to do that part, and be like, okay, well, is it still safe? Do we still want to do it? And stuff like that. So it's a constant game of like decision making.
Yeah, it seems like, you know, the way that you're describing it, the group that you're with is really super incredibly important beyond just the idea of if anything goes wrong. But this is like one person running one of these big waterfalls is way more of a team than I would have imagined before we started talking. And I'm sure that you have to place very careful consideration of who those people are and who, you know, there might be other kayakers that you have a lot of respect for and you know they're great and they know safety and everything, but for whatever reason you just don't have the juju, the mix, you know, and it's like just don't feel as good, you know, paddling with that person as I do my crew. That may not be, you know, technically that person may be better, but it just doesn't fit in. You know, I'm sure there's some of that. What about your family? Does everybody kind of understand this lifestyle?
I think so, yeah. I think it took a while to kind of like, for them to adapt to it, I guess. I think me going to the kayaking high school definitely kind of like exposed everyone to it. And they've always been like really supportive. I think like my grandparents are always like shaking their heads and stuff when they watch the videos, but otherwise, I think they're supportive, you know, and I think it's probably hard because it's inherently risky, but I think they know that. I think I try to develop the trust with them and to show them that I'm not being reckless and not doing things in an uncalculated manner, I guess, and so they were always pretty supportive of it.
Yeah. Does anybody else kayak in your family?
Yeah, my older sister actually started kayaking first, so that's kind of like why I decided to try it in the first place. So she was kayaking with her high school's outdoor program, and then that kind of was like, well, I'll try that too. So that's kind of how I got into it.
And then you have done a lot of kayaking with her. Mm-hmm. And does she like to do these waterfalls?
She does. You know, she does some. I don't think she hasn't ever really enjoyed kind of the super tall ones, but she's definitely like. She definitely runs some, and she enjoys it. So it's cool to go like with your family and to see each other progress, I guess, relatively to what you want to do and stuff.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm sure that has she ever talked you out of trying to do one of these things? Like she knows it, like she's been there, and she's like, no, don't do that one.
At first, when I came back from the kayaking school and started trying to do more of the hard creeks and stuff around here, I think she was kind of like, because she knew what they were too, just as well as I did. And it was kind of an unknown for us sort of realm of kayaking. And I think she was kind of like, thought I was being reckless or something. So, but then she kind of like came to be more support. She was always supportive, but like I think when she saw that was something that I really cared about and really wanted to work at getting better at, she was always supportive. And she would come if she didn't want to do it. She'd come set safety or whatever. And she was it's really cool. She's like a really good paddler. She runs most of the rivers we run. She'll come run them with us and everything. So
nice. So what does she do for a living now?
She is one of the outdoor program leaders at Wake Forest University right now. Yeah,
that's cool. Well, I just did a podcast with Ethan Reeve, who just was the strength and conditioning coach at Wake Forest.
Oh, cool.
And he was back, and so I just had him on yesterday. Yeah, interesting. Wake Forest must be a great school. They seem to have a lot of opportunities. They don't have a wrestling team, but we won't hold that against them horribly. But that's really cool. So what do you think has been the hardest? I keep going on these waterfalls. Are waterfalls the most challenging thing that you do, or are there are there other rivers that have presented a major challenge logistically or technically that you're super proud of, or is it mostly waterfalls? Is that what's the brass ring?
There's several of them. Waterfalls to me are kind of like, I kind of like the waterfalls that are like puzzles. So I like the ones that haven't been done before. You need to study them, figure them out yourself, and and that maybe aren't so calm going like off of them. You have to like run a rapid to get to the top of it and go off or stuff like that. So personally, that's just kind of my ultimate like satisfaction, is being able to take a complex waterfall that's not super straightforward and piece it together and make it work. But there's definitely other rivers, like that are harder in a lot of ways technically. Just because you're not free falling doesn't mean that. I mean, the rapids are dangerous, technical, hard, and a lot of it lasts. A waterfall might be hard, but whatever happens, it's going to be over in 10 seconds by the time you get to the bottom. So, but yeah, the other rivers, like expeditions and stuff, like we did. I think one of the coolest rivers that I've done was the Middle Fork of the Kings River in California. And you hike in I think it's like 12 or 13 miles, and you go over a pass.
With your kayak.
And it's like kind of the typical number of days is 5 days. People have done it in a lot shorter of time when they get to know it really well and everything. But yeah, you load your kayak up according to how many days you plan on spending in there, and then hike in over Bishop's Pass, and then put in, and then it's I think 40 or 50 miles of Class 5 whitewater to the takeout.
So hold on, you're carrying a kayak and supplies for 5 days. How do you carry your kayak?
So they make these. They make them, or you can kind of rig them up yourself. But kind of it's basically cam straps, and you attach them to the different grab loops on your kayak, and then kind of make a backpacking system out of it. So you're carrying your kayak like a backpack.
Yeah. But isn't the back hitting the ground behind you?
Kind of. You want it like adjusted so it's like so that I guess the stern's probably 2 or 3 feet off of the ground, and then you can put like a rope on the front of it, so you kind of pull it over your head, so it elevates it even more.
And your head's in the hole.
Yeah,
so you can't see her. You're just like
yeah. There's a couple ways you can set it up. It's not comfortable, but it works.
Well, 12 miles. I mean, that's a lot. Plus 5 days supplies, 5 days food. Probably. What do you do for water?
There
Filter?
we were just it depends on where you are. In California, we were just drinking like straight out of the river.
What?
So
You didn't get Giardia?
I didn't ever know.
Wow,
so
that's incredible.
Yeah.
A lot of people think you can't do it. I had Giardia one time, so I don't take any chances. I either filter everything or take my own water. It's it's not a pleasant illness.
It's probably a better idea, but that's what we were doing. So.
Yeah. Well, you're probably, as a kayaker, you're probably getting plenty of water up your nose and down your throat and in your mouth occasionally, accidentally.
Yeah.
So,
maybe
might as well
more boost your immune system or something.
I guess so. So you go in 12 miles, and then you're going to put in, and then what do you do on this river?
And then it's kind of just making it downstream. There's a lot of different types of whitewater, and it increases in volume as you go down because different rivers are running into that. So you put on like pretty high in elevation, and it's more just like a little creek, and then that confluences with another creek, and it gets bigger and bigger over the course of 40 or 50 miles. And by the end, you're in a pretty big, you're in the Middle Fork and the South Fork of the Kings River come together, and then you're in a pretty big river. So it's kind of cool to see it change, like all the way down. But the goal is to do it and then make the logistics work. You have somebody that's going to pick you up at the bottom. In our case, we had someone picking us up. So if we were a day late, then they'd probably be pretty worried about us or whatever. Kind of doing that and like knowing where you are on the river, how many miles you did that day. And then you, in that situation too, you have to take into account more of like the group, and the decisions you make are even more important, because if something happens, you're kind of like in between two mountain ranges. And so there's no, like basically we had a like GPS spot beacon. So if anything happened, we'd like the only way out would be to call the helicopter, I guess. And that's expensive and maybe not possible depending on where you are. So I'd say for me, like I've only done it once, and I was like probably more conservative than I would have been had it been the same river by a road or something, because any mistake is a lot more costly out there, I guess.
So if you were to rank the top 3 most I don't know, crazy, dangerous, extreme, the things that you're the most proud of, the top three, starting with 3 and ending with 1, what would it be?
Oh, man. That one's probably up there, the Middle Fork of the Kings River. But I'd say like I said earlier, my biggest passions, I guess, were kind of piecing together waterfalls that no one's done before. I think there's a here near Chattanooga. Have you been to Cloudland Canyon State Park? So the top, if you hike down that trail, there's kind of 3 waterfalls, and the top one, I think it's called Cherokee Falls. I did that one, and that was kind of like, I think that's probably like maybe number 3, I guess.
Wow, that's a serious waterfall, and a lot of the times you go and check that out, there's not a lot of water coming over it, so that had to be at a rainy time of the year. Yeah,
so I've been there a bunch to scout. That's one of the ones that I swam in it and like kind of like analyzed it for. I mean, really, the first time that I saw that waterfall was when I was at Macaulay, and David Levitt took me hiking there just to like just for fun, and I was like, look at these waterfalls. And then so it was cool to like over the course of probably like 3 or 4 years, like, I mean, I didn't even think it was like possible, and then come back and like do that and catch it it has to rain like, I don't know, like like right now it'd probably have to rain like 7 inches for it to have enough water to do it. In the winter, probably like 4 inches.
So when you show up at Cloudland Canyon with a kayak at the top, it's not a common deal for somebody to have a kayak at the top of that deal. So did you run into any rangers, or do you have any trouble with that?
I didn't, thankfully. I don't know that they would have been super pleased with it, but it was during the week, and it was on a rainy, kind of cold day when no one wanted to be there anyway. So I think I don't think they were on the lookout really, but most people don't like try to go kayaking. Bear Creek, which comes into that from the other side, people kayak a lot, and that's fine. But
so when you kayak that, do you just pick your kayak up and walk up all those stairs and back to your car, or do you head out all the way down the creek?
I walked back up to my car. So
that's a lot of stairs. There's like 2,000 stairs.
Yeah, there's some stairs in there, but
that's awesome. Okay, so that's number 3. What do you think is number 2?
I'd probably say there's a waterfall in Minneapolis.
Yeah, I saw that one online. That was a first descent, right?
Yeah, that was cool because my dad he has a little cabin up in kind of near the border of Minnesota and Canada, and he's always loved it up there. And so I'd been to Minnesota before, but I'd never seen the waterfall, and I started researching it and found out that no one had really done it. And then from talking to a lot of the locals, I kind of like started getting discouraged about it because they all said it was really shallow at the bottom. But I kind of like from the videos and stuff, I was kind of like it looked to me like a runnable waterfall. Like there's nothing that made me think. Usually when something's super shallow, like you can tell just from the way that the water's landing and reacting at the bottom.
Did you swim that one?
No. The thing about that is this one, I didn't live there and I didn't have an opportunity to go swim it. So it was a lot more for me. I think I got there. I scouted it for like 3 days before I did it. And the water, it was an interesting story too. The water, it was kind of low, like probably lower than I wanted to kayak off of it. And then the last day that I was there, it rained a lot and the water came up. And I think the highest recorded, they have a gauge on that creek, like a USGS gauge. And I think that the highest recorded flow on that creek was that day. It was just total. It's just like
luck. You're just there in the right place at the right time, and you'd already scouted.
Yeah. And so it was actually too high. And I came there that morning. I didn't want to do it because it was too high. And I only had like one person to help me with the safety. The other thing is there's for some reason, there's a bridge right above the lip of the waterfall, and there's a chain that goes across the river under it. And with the high water, the water was like almost up to the chain. Like it would have kind of like clotheslined you like right at your waist.
Wow.
If I don't know why they put that there. I don't know if it was for people to grab onto if they were swimming over. I really don't know why it was there, but it kind of ruins the possibility of doing it at that water level. And so I left and I went to eat breakfast, and I was like eating breakfast, and I was like, I kind of want to go back and just look at it one more time. And then And this is kind of that decision-making stuff, too. It's like, it's a bad idea. And it's it's in downtown Minneapolis. So there's hundreds of people around and stuff. And it was kind of like, whatever, regardless of the decision, if it was a good or bad decision, if you mess up, you're going to look dumb anyways. But I went back. The water had dropped like just enough to where I thought it was like the perfect water level. And this log had floated down the river.
Yeah.
And the end of the log was kind of shaped like a Y, and it hit the chain, and then the water pushed the log, and it kind of chalked on the bottom of the river and pushed the chain up enough out of the water that like I could get under it. And that was like, I was just like, man, that's hard to not take that as a sign that I should run it.
So did it also, like, I'm assuming that you just sit there and watch that waterfall and you see the line that you're going to take, and did it lift the chain up so that you can take your original line that you picked, or did you have to choose a slightly different line to get under the chain?
Yeah, if the chain wasn't there, I probably would have just come more straight downstream. But since the chain was there, I decided to. There's like kind of a little eddy over on the side, so I caught the eddy, and in the eddy, I was able to like duck under the chain and then peel out. So, wow. But it was kind of like the eddy was there kind of because of the water had come down a little bit, and then the chain was just high enough to get under it in the eddy. So.
And then what's the runway between the getting under the chain and getting to your perfect line on the brink of the falls?
From that eddy, like once I ducked under the chain, you peel out into the flow, and then it was probably about like, it's basically like it was peel out, try to make it to the other side of the river where you needed to be, and then you're going off. So it was probably like 30 feet or something from there to where it started dropping.
And then is it true, or was it media that Obama mentioned you going off of that falls in his speech the next day?
I think he did. I didn't know that he was gonna make like a speech there or whatever, but like I found that out just on the news the next day, and then I was like, I don't know if someone tagged me in it or whatever, but he briefly just said something. He was like, oh, I didn't go off in a kayak today, but it was a cool place. I don't know. It was funny, but I didn't really like intend for it to turn into anything like that. But I think because of the like record high kind of like flows or whatever, there's a lot of like news stations out there filming just the high
Plus,
water.
Obama was coming the next day. They were probably checking it out.
Yeah, so I think all those things that I wasn't really even aware of combined, just there happened to be a lot of cameras there. So it was
I love
cool,
that video. I mean, you're just looking at that falls, and then you just go bloop right down, and then you're down for, I don't know, like 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, and then you kind of pop up. And on the video that I saw, you came back, and it looked like you had a pretty good handle on this log that was going into the water. I mean, you looked like you were holding on pretty tight. And actually, when I started doing my homework about this, that was the first video that I saw.
Okay.
And I was like, man, he looks like he's holding on pretty tight. That must have been like, looked like you were held underwater for a while or whatever. But it did. I don't know if you were or not, but it looked like you were like, okay, I'm done with that, and I'm stopping right here.
Yeah.
That was a cool video. And so many of your other videos, where have you put most of your videos? On Vimeo or YouTube, or where?
My friend and I have like a Vimeo channel. I think it's called OGP Productions. So that was. I
don't know if I saw that one. I was seeing yours on Vimeo.
Okay.
Like old. It looked like it was pretty old.
Okay, yeah.
But that one, the YouTube, what?
OGP Productions.
OGP Productions. Mm-hmm. Do you get a lot of views over there?
We've gotten a good number, I guess. It's not like tons. That one in particular, I think, just because like it got shared by so many media places, got a lot and stuff like that. So I haven't had quite as much time to like manage like our videos and stuff over the past like year or so because of school. But I always have enjoyed making videos and stuff. So hopefully I can kind of like get back on it after.
It seemed like in one of those schools that I saw that you went to, maybe the gap year one, there was a portion of the course that was video production. Was that right? Yeah,
there was. Yeah, and that's kind of how they did. So yeah, they had that, and it was kind of cool because like that kind of worked its way into the school's own marketing and everything. So a lot of the kids that had scholarships, that's kind of how they got their sort of like financial aid or whatever. Cool. Is like they would film and edit videos for the school, and the school would use that as their marketing. So it kind of like made a circle, but it was cool.
Yeah, very cool. All right, we're at number one.
I think number one for me would be, there's a waterfall called Wolf Creek Falls in Colorado, and it's like the Wolf Creek ski area is a pretty popular ski area in Colorado, and you have to drive up a pass. If you're coming from north to south, you drive up the pass and then past the ski area, and just a little ways past it on the left, there's a pull off, and you can kind of tell from the road that there's a big, like a creek on the left side of the road, but you can't really see it or anything. So you pull off and have to hike down there, and and it had been run by like one of my good friends and kind of like kayaking mentors had run it 4 years before, but that was the only time it had been run, and I think people kind of just thought he was a nut for doing it, but I, like, the whole time we'd been in Colorado, I'd really been studying like the video that he made from it, and I had like talked to other people who had just been hiking there, and I talked to him a lot about it, and kind of like thought that it was like, I just wanted to go look at it, and so I went to look at it, and it was just like, I mean, like, even like part of me wanted to run it, and part of me was just like, this is so kind of like, I don't know if I want to do it or not. And then the water was a little higher too than I wanted it to be when I went. So I drove on, like, left it that day and went to Durango, and there's a outfitter shop. I think they do all sorts of outdoor guided trips and stuff. It's called Four Corners Outfitters in Durango, and someone put me in touch with the guy that owned it, and the guy that owned it had a bunch of kayaking guys working for them, and so they were able to come up with me the next day and look at it again. The water level had dropped, or the water level is just lower in the morning because of the snow melt and stuff. It's not as hot, but it looked like a pretty good level. And then they were really patient. Like, I think they were just excited. They were excited to be there, and I spent a long time looking at it. I think for me, that was probably one of the biggest decisions I made of like, am I doing this for the right reasons or not? But I decided that I wanted to do it, and so we set up like a big safety plan and made it happen. But yeah, essentially it was kind of probably like a 70 or 80 foot drop, but but it lands like right against a rock shelf at the bottom, so you have to get further out from that. So the goal is to, like, you free fall for about 20 feet, and then there's a shelf that you try to hit, and then that kind of would like bounce you out, and then you gap the shelf at the bottom. So you have to like hit the first one to miss the second one, basically.
Wow.
And then right after that, there's like another like a 30-footer right below it that kind of, by itself, it's not too bad, but just because it's right below it, if anything went wrong on the big one, then it's right there. So it's kind of like a double sequence sort of thing. But
and then the safety's down below the second one?
I had one person that was there's not much you can do between them. So I had one person in between the two, and he was like tethered into like a harness and rope and stuff. So if something did happen, he may have been able, he basically had like a chance to kind of like grab it or something. If not, you'd probably go off the second one. And then I had most of the safety at the bottom of the second one.
And then did you hit the ledge?
Yeah. That was the whole kind of the crux of it, was to like line up the rapid going into it and know exactly where you were. Because if you're in the right spot going off, then you'd hit that ledge, and that would help you miss the second one. So I spent like hours trying to find the right spot to go off. But,
wow. You're going into this Four Corners Outfitters, and you're like, hey, I'm going to run this falls. Do they know who you are, or how do you do that? Like, you're just a kid coming in going, hey, I'm going to run these falls. They don't know that you've run all of these. So how do you do that without sounding like a crazy person and asking for help? Or do they know who you are?
You know, I think the guy that I talked to at Four Corners, I was kind of introduced to him through a mutual friend. So I think that helped a little bit with that. I think too, like, for the most part in kayaking, people try to, usually if someone wants to do something like that, it's kind of like they kind of know it. They kind of know what they're talking about. So you wouldn't, I don't know. I guess you come in kind of like with, like, you sound like you know what you're talking about, and you have the confidence behind it
Yeah, but there's also somebody could come in and be like, "Hey, I'm going to run Waterfalls," and they're like, "Yeah, sure you are."
Yeah.
I mean, I would think that has to be pretty delicate. Like you're going to come in there and it's only been run once, and all the locals are afraid of it or respect it too much to do it, and now you're going to go take a swipe at it, and you need their help. I would think that you would need to really, really be careful of how you originally went in there, so that they would be like, "Okay, this kid can do it, and we want to be part of it," as opposed to, man,
for sure, yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Have fun.
Yeah, I think it all comes in like you definitely need to be respectful for sure, because there is the aspect of like the local scene, and like people are protective of their rivers or whatever, and you don't want to sound cocky or like arrogant or anything like that. So I tried to that's why I had like one of my friends that I knew pretty well like introduce me to that guy and put me in touch with him, and so he was already kind of like open to the idea, and then the people that came with me to like help me, I mean just not only then but like in kayaking in general, I think everyone deserves like an equal respect despite what their skill level. I mean, I think that goes for anything in life, like respect everyone how you want yourself to be respected. And so, one, I viewed it as something that as like, if they came, they'd be helping me, and they wouldn't like that could be an inconvenience to them. So I kind of tried to, make sure that it was something they wanted to do. And I think they genuinely seemed like even if none of us ran it, they wanted to go check it out. It's a cool place. I mean, it'd be a cool place to hike too. And then also like they were all class 5 kayakers. So I tried to view it as and like a couple of them ran the bottom, like the one that was like right below it. So I tried to make that happen. And I think just like viewing everyone with an equal respect, and being respectful of your own skills and knowing your own limitations, and not sounding like I'm going to like fire this up, like be like, I honestly did not decide to run it or any of those, like especially the one in Minnesota and this one, like I walked away twice, or I walked away from both of them at one point and came back. So it's not like there's some things that I really wanted to do, but things that I think I was also like willing to let go of if out of respect for the river and the people involved, if that was like what needed to be done, I think. So.
Interesting. It's an interesting perspective, because I would think that a lot of people wouldn't see it that way. It's almost like you're taking a Zen approach to it, and everything's got to be right and feel right, and technically and physically it has to be right with the water levels and all of that. But then you have to be at peace with this decision yourself, and your crew needs to be somewhat at peace with everything, whether it's walk away or whether it's run it, or I don't know. It seems like, I would think that somebody that's jumping something on a motorcycle would have something similar. When you look at old Evel Knievel deals, and he's like, I'm going to jump it, but I mean, there was almost more of an attitude that was going in. And I'm sure, because he made plenty of money doing that there was some salesmanship involved, and really behind the scenes, it was probably more like this, like, is everything going well? Is this a good decision? Am I doing this for the right reason? That's interesting. That's a very interesting decision-making process. So what's next? You're going to get out of nursing school? Are you going to continue kayaking to this level? Or are you going to back off a little bit? What are your goals?
So yeah, I have one more semester left, and then I think I'm going to kind of play it by ear, but I have one of my big goals. I bought a slalom kayak a couple of years ago.
I'm familiar with those, like the Olympic style. Okay.
Yeah, and so I've been getting in that as much as I can. We actually have a race this Friday, I think, that I might have to skip class for. But that's kind of like, I really miss from wrestling. I miss being competitive, like running waterfalls and hard creeks and stuff. I think I'll always love that. But like, it's kind of competing against yourself in a way. And I kind of miss like organized competition, like wrestling and the team and community that kind of like surrounds that. Like one of my goals is to try to get better at slalom. And I've been doing that as much as I can while I'm in school, but I think when I get out of school, I'll have a lot of time to focus on it and hopefully get the feel for it.
What's the best training for slalom kayaking? In actually kayaking, or do you do some gym work as well?
There'd probably be people that would say different things. Like the Europeans are all like about training and like scheduled focused training and stuff. And I think there's a place for that, just like in any sport, depending on what level you want to take it to. But I also think like sometimes it can be taken too seriously, and like you have to have fun with it. I think it'll be interesting. Most people in slalom kayaking are brought up slalom kayaking, and then they branch into creek boating or other whitewater kayaking and stuff. I don't think there's been quite as many people that have been primarily like in the like technical creek boating kind of aspect and then come over to slalom. I could be wrong on that, but as far as most of the like creek boaters that I know don't get into that as much. And so I'm kind of interested to see, because like I'm fairly confident kayaking. It's kind of a weird feeling because the timing is, you're trying to make it through these gates as precise as you can. If you touch them, if you even touch it, you get penalties. If you miss it, you get more. I mean, if you miss it, you get a huge penalty and stuff like that. So it's weird for me to feel like a beginner, I guess. Like it really feels, and I think, but at the same time, I have a lot of confidence in reading water and lines, and I think that I'm excited to try to like just get the timing in and everything. And I think if I can do that and like learn that part of it and combine it with what I already know, I think it would be really fun. So that's kind of what I'm interested in. As far as training, I think kayaking in general, the whitewater, just being out there as much as possible is a big part of it. I think you need to spend specific time for slalom, but I think sometimes people view it as they only do slalom. Mm-hmm. And I think that's in the long run a little bit self-limiting, because you can always tell a slalom kayaker when they come on the creeks, because they're just they paddle a little differently. So I don't know, but I think
that's what they're probably saying about you when you go into the slalom.
Oh, it definitely is.
Look at that creek boater. Do you know who Kelly Starrett is?
I don't think so.
Kelly Starrett has mobilitywod.com, WOD, workout of the day. And he wrote a book called Supple Leopard. And he has written several other books. One's desk bound. But he is also a PT and went to school. But before that, he was an Olympic kayaker.
Oh,
and so I think he might be a good resource for you, because a lot of the things that he's seeing is, from so much sitting like this, he was getting really tight in his hip flexors and stuff like that. And he's developed a lot of these stretches and mobility exercises and shoulder impingements and all kinds of stuff that he's brought out and made mainstream. But I'd be interested to see what you thought about his stuff, because he definitely comes from a kayaking background and a PT background, and then he's really changed a lot of how people are taking care of themselves these days.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But anyway, man, I wish you all the best with this, and if you decide you're going into slalom kayaking, I'm sure you're going to be a force to be reckoned with. How can people find you, learn more about you?
I have a Facebook account. Well, I stay in touch with a lot of kayakers that way. We have like a Vimeo channel. It's OGP Productions on Vimeo, and those are kind of like my two main ways of staying in touch with the kayaking.
And if you wanna see some of these waterfalls that he's run, you can look up Hunt Jennings Waterfall or Hunt Jennings Kayak, and that's how I found them. And there's a bunch of them on there, not just the waterfalls, but running some really technical rapids and all kinds of stuff. I mean, you were everywhere. When I looked on the internet, it was pretty much pretty easy to find you. But I love the conversation. I love the alternative education path that you took, and I think it's really neat. So I'm sure that the listeners are going to find it the same. If you want to get in touch with Hunt, I'm sure that you can get him through Facebook or find him online somewhere. But anyway, Hunt, thanks so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. We'll do it again.
Sweet. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Man, I enjoyed that conversation with Hunt. I hope you liked it too. If you did, please take a second and go to iTunes and rate and review this show. That would be a huge help, and I would really appreciate it. Also, don't be afraid to send me an email, podcast@saltwaterexperience.com. I will get that email and I will read it. And if you have suggestions for her future guests or suggestions on how we can improve the show, love to hear it. Love to hear it. Or if you just want to say hi, drop me an email. Until next week, we'll see you on the water.